So you were talking about player power as a whole, and obviously James Harden was still on the Nets the last time we had you on the show. So what do you think was the biggest reason for that whole fallout the way it happened so quickly? Because James Harden was traded literally in January of that year, 2021, to the Nets. We have you on the show later that year, and then all of a sudden, literally about a year later, he wants out again. So what do you think was the biggest fallout between James Harden and those other core players, even some of the other veterans?
Obviously, no players are going to say, but it's Kyrie Irving's availability at that time. That's the main ticking point of the whole thing, right? Because at that point, he couldn't play home games. There was no movement at all about the vaccine mandate getting lifted. And obviously, when you have the NBA trade deadline, which was February 11th, think about the mandate got lifted like a month later. But at that point, it's like, okay, this team hasn't played together at all. They were struggling at that point. James Harden was also out. Kevin Durant was leading a bunch of rookies. And obviously, those rookies, 2 of them couldn't even play in the postseason unless they have their contracts lifted to a standard deal. And you look across the board, just the rotations, Nash experimenting as well, putting out different lineups and different pieces. Like Nash put out James Johnson, Andre Drummond, and Blake Griffin on the floor together. Like it's like James Harden's probably sitting on the bench, like man, like Daryl Morey, what you up to? Like you know what I mean? Like it was that point, So that it was that hard of experimenting there. So, it was definitely Kyrie Irving, obviously, his availability. Because if you don't have Kyrie Irving, then you got that, obviously, with James, too. He made it a big point coming to Brooklyn that, hey, I want to come here, but I also don't want to be that have to score 30, 40 points a game. And in that whole entire year when he was on the Nets, he was demanded of that. That's what they really needed at that time. Obviously, they had Kevin Durant on the floor, which alleviates a little pressure. But when you really just dive into it, James was like, not down 995, like right down there. Who we got? Philly, we got Joel Embiid, a bunch of shooters. Reminds me of the Rocket days, and they're like, well, they got a core together. You could say what you want about Doc Rivers. I don't know how he feels about Doc.
Can't stand him.
Yeah, I think he's gone too. So I don't know, but I think D'Antoni takes that job too. That's like scripted. It's gonna happen. But I don't know, man. Yeah, that's kind of my answer in a nutshell. It's definitely Kyrie Irving's availability. No one's gonna say it, obviously, but yeah, it was that.
Chris, this offseason is going to be very interesting for a lot of the New York teams with the Knicks. I mean, you heard the Knicks were over there in Dallas, and you had Julius Randle scouting. I mean, Julius Randle, Mr. Bricklayer himself, is scouting. Obviously, Jalen Brunson's a free agent next year. You have, obviously, Donovan Mitchell wants out of Utah. When you look at this offseason, and it's not a good free agent offseason, where do you see the Nets going? Even with these trades that you're saying that they might surprise the world and make a trade, what's out there where they can make a trade that can make this team that much better?
I think it's going to start with wings, right? I can imagine they're going to probably inquire on like an OG Anunoby type player, some 3-and-D guy that's probably going to be on a little bit of a cheaper side. You would give Seth Curry maybe their last first of 2028 or whatever the case is. And then you look at the other side of things, obviously you're going to look at the buyout market when that time comes. The Nets are always aggressive then. That's obviously in March. That's well after the offseason. And then they don't have any picks as well, so I can imagine they may make a draft day deal just to get a player or even get a third team in a deal to receive a player back. Then you look at like other avenues and, even though the Nets have had 2 disappointing years, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving is attractive for a lot of players, and especially in a big New York market where obviously you have the endorsements, you obviously live in the city, you get all those extracurricular stuff that come with the position. It's definitely a little bit of attractive. Like I've heard that from a lot of guys too. Like I remember I was texting Jamal Crawford and he was telling me too, he's like, yeah, like that attracts a lot of people, especially like in New York, LA, big market teams. Mm-hmm. So it does attract. So when you think about this Nets team as just a whole, it's one of those things that like, you don't have much value in Ben Simmons. Yeah, a lot of people think that Ben Simmons could get flipped, and what team is going to really take that on, and what are you really going to get in return? Because there's a lot of money on that deal. The guy hasn't played. You got obviously all the other stuff that comes with that package. That's not going to be too out either. So, you really have to start looking at your outside piece. You got to look at Joe Harris. You got to look at Seth Curry. You got to look at like all these other guys, So it'll be interesting. But I think they do make a couple small splashes. But at the same time, it's the Nets. Sean knows his title window's closing.
We are talking to Nets daily writer and reporter Chris Milholen. You mentioned Ben Simmons again, and it's so funny. How does this man, who's making a ton of money right now in the NBA, and I'm not trying to be rude, and I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, This guy's suing Philadelphia for $20 million. He didn't play at all this year. He has a lot to say on and off the court, not only to Doc Rivers, but some of the players. Joel Embiid said, get him out of here. I don't want to deal with him anymore. He's very hated in the NBA right now. A lot of people don't want to play with him. How could you sit here with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving in the offseason and say, listen, we're going to give you a healthy Ben Simmons. By the way, he didn't even want to step on the court in the Celtics series to help us out. We're going to bring him in, and we're going to make a nice trade and bring another decent player in to help you guys out, and we're going to win a championship next year with the team that we have. How could you sell that to Kevin Durant after being swept for the first time in his career in an NBA playoff series?
It's all about trust, especially with Kevin. This is the same guy that when Ben Simmons was traded, hopped on the phone with him, talked about everything, and he's the leader of the franchise. And with Kevin too, it's like that's a great point because with Kevin, he knows that that. Listen, man, even if you were put this roster even next year and you had a full healthy roster, that team's couldn't even get past the second round, in my opinion. The roster construction is it's really bad. So when you have to sell these type of things to free agents and trust, it really comes down to, okay, that's Kevin Durant, that's Kyrie Irving. At the same time, we know what could happen if in New York with vaccination mandates, if COVID comes back and the waves come back. With Kevin Durant, obviously, he's had a couple seasons in a row now where he's had injuries. He's missed at least 20 games as well. So you have a lot of stuff in those factors as well. It's hard to sell. But at the same time, I think a lot of guys would be intrigued to go for it. Because, that's the thing. Because with Ben, it's one of those things you just don't know what's going to happen. It's like the fit, for example. Like last time, what is it? I was talking about when Ben Simmons arrived to the Nets, I was like, I got to see how it works out before I could even make a guess because they could put him in the post, they could make him facilitate, rebound, push in transition, just your overall number one guy that you put on the opposing team's best offensive weapon. Right. So you have that as well. He's going to plug a lot of holes if he does play and if he does actually string together a lot of games here. But, this team's just a big what-if team. That's really what this team's identity is. It's just what if. What if Kevin Durant was healthy? What if Kyrie Irving got the jab? What if Ben Simmons played?
What if they don't wear any underwear during the game? I mean, seriously.
I wouldn't rule that out of Kyrie Irving.
Oh, man. The Brooklyn Nets.
So is there a player that maybe is not as talked about that might be available in the offseason, whether it's a star player or whether it's a good role player that you think would be realistic for the Nets to acquire?
It's so tough because I honestly do think this team's going to be in a big house cleaning situation, and they're really going to just start from the outside and build around KD here. And when you have a guy like Ben Simmons, for example, if it's going to be a star, Ben Simmons has to be in that deal because you can't afford it. You know what I mean? The luxury tax is already through the roof, and it really depends on what team's going to take that on. If Donovan Mitchell really shoves himself out, are you going to want to put Kyrie Irving and Donovan Mitchell together? Are you going to put Kyrie Irving off the ball and have Donovan as a primary ball handler? They're both real shooting guards at the end of the day, so I don't think they're going to correlate well. And then you have Kevin Durant as well. So, it's one of those things that you just kind of really just see out and what happens. I thought maybe it's a stretch here. You got to look at what DeAndre Ayton's availability is. Obviously, he's going to want a huge deal, but I can imagine. Think about it, if you're in his shoes and Phoenix denies you an extension, signs Landry Shamet over you, and then obviously Phoenix is good. They're built on continuity, playing right now 2-2, but it's really up in the air. It's really what can the Nets gauge with the tools that they have in the shed, because they don't have a lot of tools at all. So they're in a sticky spot. They are really in a sticky spot.
Chris, we really appreciate you joining us. You're awesome, and really, we only hope for the best with the Nets. Not a chance.
Well, at least give me 3 weeks.
I'm a Knicks fan.
I could actually just
I'm a Knicks
relax.
fan. I know. I know.
I know with this team like that, it's always in the off season, you're out, you're with your boys, and it's just bang, whoa. Yeah. It's oh my God, I gotta get home.
Well, you look at it the best way you could look at it. You don't have to go to the games anymore. You can sit in the bar, hang out with your boys, and not deal with the crap that you have to deal with after the games. So that's a good thing.
Me and the boys, if Raptors force a 7, we're in Philadelphia. That's all. We already got the tickets. We got the refundable too on the insurance too. So. We're starting early. No time to waste.
Well, hopefully James Harden actually starts to play, because sometimes I think he's in la-la land half the time when the playoffs start.
We know how he is in the playoffs.
Yes.
This isn't anything.
He's now the third option.
It's unbelievable that Maxey becomes the number 2 option. He's the third option when this guy's a superstar player, comes from Houston. By the way, he's a choke artist.
I'm telling you, man. Like, it's one of those little quick point. It's one of those points. It's like when you look at all those guards, right, that have been aggressive getting to the rim. Like, think about a Brandon Jennings, a Derrick Rose, all those guys that really played physical.
All played with the Knicks.
They always have their collapses when they're in their early 30s, and that's where James Harden is right now. When you throw your body around like that, constantly just bruising up a lot of defenders, you're not going to hold up forever. And, I think that's what's happening with James Harden right now.
Go ahead, throw the Knicks under the bus. Go ahead, throw it deeper.
The Knicks?
Dig them deeper. It's a hole. It's 6 feet under.
That was Phil Jackson's fault.
I love
players.
Your Knicks are in good standing. It's just that Leon's got to make a couple more appearances. I've seen that guy like twice. I've seen Rob Pelinka more than him.
We have Worldwide Wes. I mean,
I haven't seen him either.
Well,
he was holding up the jersey when he was signed.
He was hanging out with Julius Randle at the Dallas game.
I know. I'm like, I saw that and I was like, because they didn't even like cut it at the camera either. They they had the little imbalance. I'm like, there's no way.
What the hell is Julius Randle doing over there in Dallas?
I know he lives there. Like he has an off-season home. What are you doing? Like, what are you doing? It's so fresh after the season too. It's like you couldn't wait. Go to like a conference finals and like go sit in like the fourth row and hope the camera doesn't get out.
It is an absolute.
He's trying to find a way to get traded there, then just get traded out of there again, like Porzingis did.
Yeah, well.
Mavs
won that trade. Yeah. They got the boy Dinwiddie down there, and he's thriving. Same with Brunson.
And the Knicks
they're going to regret not paying Brunson that cheap extension.
Absolutely, and that's where I believe Jalen Brunson will be a Knick next year. I absolutely believe that.
You want him?
I'll take him. They need a point guard.
What are you giving him?
I think the Knicks
are
probably
right.
It's probably between 70 and 80 million. That's what he's going to get. And with Donovan Mitchell, they're going to have to trade probably Julius Randle to bring him in. I mean,
that's what they're going to have to do. And
either that or trade.
Depending on how bad Donovan wants out, you guys have leverage. You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
That's the big thing too. If Donovan really shoves his way out in the offseason, you guys have leverage there. So it's not going to be a package where they're going to command RJ Barrett, for example.
They're not getting him. So
no, it's going to be like Julius, Alec Burks, and maybe a first or two. You know what I mean? It'll be something like that.
No, I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, Chris. Tell the fans how they can find you on social media.
I'm on C Milholen SB on Twitter. The Works on Nets Daily, and that's pretty much it, dude. I don't got too much, dude. I'm just living out here.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us. We'll get you on very, very soon. We love you.
Yeah, dude.
And
whenever you want me on, you know how to reach me. You know how to text. Do your thing.
All right.
Hopefully, I'm not going to be smacked in the back of a Camry or whatever the heck.
Well, you know what? The next time you see Kevin Durant, tell him to take his game-worn underwear and sign it for Speedy. He wants to frame it.
No, I would burn it.
He wants it.
I would just burn it, Chris.
Well, I'm looking at his little green screen back there. And, I'm thinking that's Fenway, isn't it?
That is Fenway. Yes, it is.
Oh man.
It's funny. We actually had a guest about 2 months ago that actually thought I was in Boston because of that.
Oh, really?
Yes.
They're like, get out of there. Dude, Boston fans, too, they'd be chucking any can at you up there.
And we're hearing all the abuse from Boston fans all over social media to me saying that, the Yankees, they're disgusting.
Yeah, how do you think I've got a fair share of Boston in the past 3 days? Everyone's just sending just random, it's like, guys, I'm like, what are we doing here?
You heard it right here. The Brooklyn Nets writer says he was in Boston and they treat you like garbage. So there you go.
Oh Lord. Well, listen, Boston, they got some good homegrown beer up there. I'm telling you.
I'm sure they do.
That's the one good thing about it.
Did you bring your raincoat?
Oh, no, hell no. Hat's going to be good enough. Beer warms you up. That's it.
Oh, thank you, Chris. We really appreciate you.
No problem, boys. If you need me, let me know.
Absolutely.